We improved our app quite a bit, but the issue we have is that if we click on a server or a user, we load a brand new page. It would be nicer if we would load it next to this menu, so we need some nested routing. We can also see that in the app module, we kind of have some duplication here. All these routes here start with servers and all these routes with users. So it would be nice to nest them and to have some child routes which all start with servers then here, in this case for example. Let's add such child routes. To do this, I'll go to my servers component route, to the /servers route, and I'll add another property, children. Children takes another array of routes, so now I can simply take my two other servers routes here and add them inside of this array as children. Now, servers should now be removed because that is now always prepended at the beginning anyways, so we have to make sure to get rid of it here. And now we have just ID and ID added. So this is now already better because now we group that together. It gives us more than this visual grouping here though. You notice that on the servers here, we have the servers component as the, component to be loaded still. The question now is, where will the server component be loaded then? Because that is yet another child route of our servers component. And you can see that this is an issue. If we reload our app here, everything's working. If I click on test server, now we get an error. Because now the error tells us that it cannot find an outlet to load our server component in. And indeed it can't, because the only router outlet, the only hook in our code where it should load components, is in our app component here. Now that is reserved for all our routes on the top level. So /nothing, /users, users ID name, and servers. But the child routes of servers need a separate outlet because they can't override the servers component. Instead, they should be loaded nested into this servers component. And that actually is the behavior we want. So we can quickly get there by going to the servers component HTML file. And here where we load the edit page or the app server page, well here I will simply comment out all that code and instead add a router outlet here. This now adds a new hook which will be used on all child routes of the route being loaded on the servers component, which of course is our /servers route here. So all these child routes will be loaded in this router outlet place now. So if we save this and now we let this reload, you don't see anything here, but if I click a server, it's now loaded next to the menu because this is where we added our second router outlet. And this is how you can easily add child routes. Let's do the same for the user routes now. In the app module, I'll add children here, so this property which takes an array of routes. And I only have one nested route here, but that's fine, so I will add it here. Get rid of the users at the beginning, just have then the ID and name, the two dynamic parameters, and load the user component. And now in my users component HTML file, I'll replace my app user here with another router outlet where all the user-related child routes, or the one user-related child route we have, will be loaded. So if we save this, you now see we load the user next to it. And that is why it is super important to dynamically update the ID and so on, because the component wasn't exchanged. We were able to switch the loaded user while this old component, the user component, the single user component, was already loaded. And this is how you can implement child routing, nested routes, with this children property, which then holds all the nested routes.